Thomas, and I will explain you now the third feature that characterizes complex systems, complex adaptive systems, which is self-organization. So we now understood what contextuality and feedback is. Contextuality is having not smooth dependencies on the variables, and feedback is the ability of a system to act according to what has happened, make decisions of what's going to happen next. So if we think about it, the existence of feedback mechanisms imply that they will tend to self-organize. So this is a very typical example of a flock of birds, where you see a large collection of birds and that they all move in a particular shape as if they will be all organized in their motion. But they are not. They are simply responding to the local feedback mechanisms that each one has, saying, I'm going to try to align a little bit to what the other birds are doing. That's actually what they do. They try to align their motion to what the other birds are doing, but they don't want to be too close because they want to avoid crashing. So when all of them behave in this setting, in this idea, they will become a whole, a moving whole, even though none of them knows exactly where the others are going to move or where they are moving whatsoever. Just by keeping these simple rules of feedbacking between my motion and its motion, the other motion, and the other with the other, and with myself as well, this particular, let's say, collection of feedbacks creates this self-organizing collection of birds moving together, which is the flock. So this is completely different to what traditional science tends to explain, because in traditional science we consider processes where there is a beginning state moving towards an end state, future. So there is the beginning and the end. In this case, the self-organization is not about looking for an end, it's trying to discover the collection of things all together doing something that wasn't even planned to be done, and that's known as self-organization. So it's interesting because self-organization changes the setting of traditional thinking of evolution towards an end state, like as something that in the end will be reached, like the minimal energy or the maximal prosperity or the maximal reproduction success, and it looks for the construction of a dynamic future where things will never eventually reach an end state, but will be changing according to what all the entities in the system are doing, co-adapting and eventually forever in a new way forever, like novel ways changing and not reaching a particular end state. So if we think about it, self-organization is the natural consequence of local interactions coupled with feedback mechanisms. So, interestingly, multiple combinations of feedback mechanisms lead to different forms of organization. So, for example, we get spatial configurations that self-organize, like galaxies, through the mass and the gravitational interactions. Those celestial objects that are too close, they will collide. Those that are too far will escape, and those that are not will remain in a sort of galaxy or a solar system as we know it. In crystals, we have the same. Atoms that have these bounding forces, if they get too close, they will separate, and if they get too far, they will tend to stay connected through electric force. So the crystals are formed by these configurations of electric forces between the atoms, and they form particular configurations. That's what we call crystals, actually, when these groups of atoms self-organize in a particular configuration. A city, the same. The cities, we start with a house, maybe with a church, depending on the culture, a church or a state administration house, and then people start settling, then you get the hospital, then you get the supermarket, and this and that, and there is a spatial configuration that self-organizes. And we see the cities evolve all the time, but the self-organized configuration remain, biological forms, and so on. We can have also behavioral patterns, not spatial configurations. As I explained, the flocks of birds, the traffic jams, or the prices and the consumption of goods also are behavioral patterns. Or the homeostatic control. Life, for example, the living system controls its own variables that define what is to be alive, like heartbeat or temperature or levels of particular components in the body. But also language. Language is a homeostatic control. I cannot start speaking in words that nobody knows. If I start speaking in words nobody knows, nobody will reply to me something meaningful, so I will not be able to communicate. So language is a structure of words that is always exchanging with others, but it has its homeostatic control. You cannot just say whatever word and it's going to be part of the language. The communication mediates and controls through feedback the maintenance of language in time. And of course it evolves, new words come into play, they propagate and they become part of the language, as it happens with the traits in a physical body for natural evolution. The same with cultural norms. Behaviors, particular behaviors or beliefs are accepted or not accepted, are punished or fostered, etc. So self-organization goes beyond physical variables, can also go to cultures and so on, as feedback mechanisms, as contextuality as well. So important to mention here is that complex systems go beyond physical systems. It's a very important moment to mention it. So here we got spatial, behavior, homeostasis, language, body, galaxies. So now the question is, let's go a little bit further and try to think that a self-organizing system is the environment of another self-organizing system, like it happens, for example, between the ecological systems, like the happening of trees and animals and birds and migrations and marine ecosystems and all this ecosystemic view of the planet, and the social system of humans. These are two systems which are coupled. Actually, the ecosystem is our environment, but now with all the interactions or with all the technology that we humans have, we can think now of the ecosystem as if we are its environment, because we are imposing changes and making important modifications of it all the time. So the question is, do we have an open-ended future? A fusion of them, destruction of one towards the other? With this question, I finish the third part of the features of a complex adaptive system.